We'll start. Good evening, everybody. I am thrilled to present to you Jill Zawacki, who is a supervisory archivist at the Obama Presidential Library. She's been in that role for 7 years, but she spent her entire career at the National Archives. Before this, well, she started with a NARA degree at the University of Michigan. Um, from there, let's see, she started as a archiving tech at the Gerald Ford Library. After 3 years of that, she went off to the George W. Bush Library. And in 2017, she started at the Obama. She's a supervisory archivist, meaning there's 18 people that she supervises and keeps in track. And she's currently living in Chicago. And she's going to talk to us about the process for building this first ever digital library. And with that, I will let you have the floor, Jill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. And thank you, Justin, for reaching out and setting this up. I'm really happy to be able to share about the Obama Library with you guys and answer any questions you have. I will say, full disclosure, that my supervisor, our library director, is lurking in the audience, so she can jump in and correct me if I make any mistakes. But we're very glad to be here. I have some slides that I hope you guys can see, and I'll go through those, but please at any point feel free to ask questions, whether you put them in the chat. I got the chat open. I don't know if Zoom has a raise hand function or just jump in. This can be very informal. I want to share information and answer any questions you have at any point. I do intend to have some time at the end as well for questions, so there should be plenty of opportunities. But let me come on, slides. Okay, so Justin went over my bio, so I will go through this pretty fast. But as he mentioned, I'm the supervisory archivist at the Barack Obama Presidential Library, which is part of the National Archives and Records Administration. We are a federal government agency. We are part of the executive branch. So in the structure of things, that is where we fall. I currently oversee all of our archival holdings of various formats and the digitization program that is focusing on digitizing and turning our paper records into digital copies. And right now I supervise about 18 staff. I have been with the National Archives really my entire career. I started as a student worker at the Gerald Ford Library, which is on the University of Michigan campus, when I was a grad student. So that was my foot in the door. When I first started grad school, I always thought I was going to work in public libraries. That was my background. I started working in my little tiny town public library in high school, and that was my goal. And then when I got the student worker job at the Ford Library, that really opened up my eyes to not only archival work, but federal government records and their importance and the jobs associated with them. And I really followed that all the way through at a variety of different National Archives locations. I, again, started in Ann Arbor. I moved out to the DC area for a short time. I moved to Dallas, Texas, and I was with the George W. Bush Presidential Library for 6.5 years. And then when the Obama Library was being stood up, I moved back to DC to be on the team that was wrapping up the end of the administration, and then follow the Obama materials out to Illinois. Because I'm from the Midwest, I grew up in Michigan, and I wanted to get back to the Midwest ultimately. So as I was telling Justin, my moving days are done. I don't intend to keep jumping around any further. But for those of you who are starting your careers, I do really encourage you to consider different geographic locations, and for both career advancement and also exploration. If you would have asked me if I would have ever thought I would live in Texas, I would have said absolutely not. And I did. And I learned a lot. I made some amazing friends and colleagues, and it was a really good experience. So, and then my educational background, as I said, I went to the University of Michigan for my master's degree and Wayne State University, which is in Detroit, for my undergrad. So, about the National Archives Presidential Library System. Currently, the National Archives administers and runs a system of 16 libraries. So they start with Herbert Hoover and go forward all the way through Joe Biden. The system was actually started by FDR. He was the first president to, we consider him the founder of the system, in that he donated his books and papers to the federal government. And he also donated a building to house those materials and make them available to the public. So he set that precedent, and presidents subsequently after him followed it. And then Herbert Hoover, who came before FDR, was like, hey, that's a great idea. I want to do it too. And he also donated his materials. So chronologically, FDR is the first, but in the order of presidents, Hoover is the first in NARA system. There are many other presidential libraries, like I'm in Illinois, the Lincoln Library is very prominent, but those are not administered by the National Archives. They can be privately run. The Lincoln Library is state run. So when I'm talking about a presidential library, I'm specifically focusing on those under the National Archives purview and those that are part of the federal government. So as you can see, these libraries are all across the country. They typically were placed in the area that of the president's choosing, and that led to a variety of geographic locations. Some presidents really wanted them in their hometown or home state where they spent their formative years. Others chose locations where they attended school. So a variety of choices. The Gerald Ford Library Museum is the only library that is a split site, where the library is in Ann Arbor, Michigan, on the campus of University of Michigan, where President Ford attended, and then the museum is in his hometown of Grand Rapids. He specifically chose a split model, which NARA followed, and then after that, NARA said, we're not going to do that again. So he is the only one to have that split location. And then I'll explain a little more about the Obama model, but the Donald Trump library, materials from his first term, and the Biden library are both housed at the National Archives location in College Park, Maryland. So as I'll talk a little more about the new model and what being a digital library means, we're changing and evolving that term to focus more on the collection of materials, the collection of documents and artifacts. That is what a presidential library is, not just a brick and mortar building. So yes, there is a Trump library. Yes, there is a Biden library. They have a website, they have a staff, they have a collection, just happens to be housed within a larger National Archives building. And that is what the Obama Library is also moving towards. So right now, I am in the Chicago area. I am in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. We're about 45 minutes, an hour outside of downtown when there's no traffic. When there is traffic, it's like 100 years to get to downtown.
Excuse me, Jill, can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
sure.
Obviously, presidential administrations generate a lot of physical stuff, papers and whatnot.
Mhm.
That all ends up at the site in DC, the National Archives site.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Um, so, and I'll get more into a little bit about the history of what comes to a presidential library. So Obama, we're in a temporary space in the Chicago area. That was a leased space that was set up directly after President Obama left office, and the National Archives moved all of the materials out to Illinois. We, at that time, Kyle, you asked the question about when the decision was made. So at that time, the decision had not been made to move towards an all digital model. So they were still thinking, hey, eventually President Obama will build us a building and we will move all of this stuff again into a building in the Chicago area. President Obama made a different decision. So all of our materials are currently, as we speak, being moved back to the DC area because the lease on our facility is closing. It was always intended to be temporary, and we've come to the end. And the National Archives made the decision to store the Obama materials at its Archives 2 location, just like the Trump and Biden materials. So we are still a presidential library. We still have staff. We still have all of our collections. We're just going to be housed in a larger National Archives facility. So a little bit about the history of the presidential library system in terms of the legalities. I mentioned FDR was the first, and he donated his materials to the government. So at that time, presidential records, papers, books were all considered personal property of the president. There was no law that said these materials needed to be maintained. They were considered completely personal. Presidents could take them after they left office and do whatever they want. So some of them chose to donate their materials to institutions. Some of them went into private hands. The Library of Congress collected a significant amount of the early president's papers. And some of them just destroyed their papers. Mary Todd Lincoln famously burned a lot of the Lincoln material. So FDR saw the value in research in his materials and donated them back to the government and set up the institution. So presidents followed his example and donated their materials back. And that was the model up until Richard Nixon, where there were some questionable records issues. And at that time, Congress passed a very special law. It's called PRIMPA, which is the Presidential Recordings and Materials Preservation Act, specific to the Nixon era documents that effectively seized those materials during the investigation. So Nixon is an anomaly. He has his own law. And then Congress got together and passed in 1978 the Presidential Records Act. And that is the law that governs the Obama records. It was passed in 1978 and it went into effect with the president that was elected in 1980. So from Ronald Reagan's records going forward, there is a law that establishes that presidential records are the property of the US government. And at the end of the administration, they are turned over to the National Archives. There are different laws that govern the presidential gifts, which are what make up our artifact collection. But similarly, they state that these artifacts, these gifts, are property. They were given to the president in his role as president of the United States. They were not given to Barack Obama, the individual person. He accepted it on behalf of the United States. So it becomes government property at the end of his term. So that's a lot of the background, a little legalese about how the presidential library system came to be. Whoops, we're not at the end yet. What are we doing, slides? Let me go back to this. All right. So now we'll dive a little deeper into the Obama Library itself. And what do we have in our collections? So I mentioned we have artifacts and we have records. And it is a lot of stuff. We were storing our materials in a really large furniture warehouse. Think super tall ceilings. It was like the ending scene in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the crates are being wheeled in with the big doors closing. That is what our warehouse really did look like. So on our artifact side, our collections are made up of, as I mentioned, gifts to the president. So that can be gifts from foreign leaders, gifts from domestic citizens that people mail in. We also collect the holiday decorations that are used over the course of the administration. So each holiday, specifically the Christmas season, is usually given a theme, and a lot of customized decorations are made for each year, and those come to the National Archives. And then we do accept donated materials. So people who reach out to us with their specific items, we choose to accession certain pieces into our collection. And that basically adds up to about 50,000 items, individual things that our artifact staff has to track and store and care for and make available to be loaned out to other institutions to be on display. So this is a rough breakdown of what you can see. Lots of clothes, art, household accessories. Other includes, we have a lot of things related to the pets, the dogs. We have dog bowls, we have dog leashes, we have dog collars, we have dog clothes, dog beds. People were very generous in giving to the Obama dogs. On the archive side, we have a lot of paper, despite the fact that we have a significant amount of born digital material. So President Obama came into office in 2009. That was certainly very much the digital era, but there's still a significant amount of paper. My opinion, I don't think the White House will ever be able to go truly paperless. The amount of paper is dropping as we go forward. Again, I worked at the George W. Bush Library, who was a two-term president. President Obama, also two-term, does have significantly less paper, but it's still a lot. We estimated between 25 and 30 million pieces of paper. That's a lot of paper. And I don't think they will ever get down to zero. There is still something very significant about a presidential decision and either a check mark on a piece of paper or a signature as a final indication of policy and decision. And to me, again, my personal opinion, I do think that that is really important and valid and will continue for a while. Outside of paper, we also have AV material. We have all of the photographs that were taken during the presidential administration. Those are in digital format and stored in our electronic records repository. And we have a significant amount of video footage. So this video footage, while done in digital formats, high def, is stored on media. So it lives on Blu-rays. It lives on a specific proprietary Sony format called XD-Cam. So that is a preservation concern that we are, facing and addressing as we can. Obviously, the White House knew they were producing a vast amount of digital material, but in order to store that in a cloud space or something, it would have been a huge, huge lift. So it was stored on media. And then we do have all of our electronic records, which includes email, computer files we basically have the home drive and also the shared office drives from all the White House. And those are all stored in our electronic records system. So that is already preserved digitally. We're able to view and search it and make that available through FOIA requests. So as I mentioned before, if you guys have questions, just type them in the chat, interrupt, that's fine, or write them down and we can talk at the end. So outside of numbers, what's really in the artifacts? And our collections manager describes it as items of specific significance that document the Obama administration. So that can be the actual work of the administration and their initiatives, or the context and what was happening during that time period. So this artifact you can see here It was actually being put into a custom box that was built by our artifact team, and it was being sent out to another institution, one of our fellow presidential libraries, for display. This is a Fern Award. So when President Obama was rolling out and promoting the Affordable Care Act, he was on Zach Galifianakis Between Two Ferns. And after he was on that, they presented him with a Fern Award, which really is a fern in a little pot, spray painted gold. But that was given to him and it became part of our collections. And then it was featured in a Presidents and Humor exhibit that was at the George W. Bush Library. So
Jill,
that is an example. Yeah.
we have a question in the chat. Jenna asked what the FOI, the Freedom of Information Act
The
request process looks like, and what is the general time scale for processing those requests?
Sure. That actually comes up in one or two slides. So I'll go through that. And then Jenna, if you have further questions, we can talk more. All right. Another example, this is a honey dipper that has, I don't think, actually you can see the bee is one of the logos that the First Lady, Mrs. Obama, used frequently. She really liked the bee motif and the ways that bees work together in a hive to really illustrate the working of the administration. This honeypot was produced by the Obama administration to give to guests. So, as a diplomatic gift, if a foreign leader came to visit, there's often an exchange of gifts, and often this honeypot would be given because the Obamas also were the first to have bees, a beehive on the White House grounds. So it really became associated with them, and they incorporated that with the honeypot as a gift to those who visited. So we have a sample set of that material to document what the Obamas would give, not only what they received. I mentioned holiday decorations. These are just some. These are Bo and Sunny, which are the Obama's two dogs. These guys are actually, Big Bo is like 7 feet tall. He is on a chicken wire frame with yarn and felt to fluff him out. And these were used in the 2016 holiday season. I was lucky. I was in the DC area at the end of the administration, and I was lucky to be able to tour the White House. So this is them in their native habitat. And then they were packed up. They have lovely, very comfortable crates, and they were shipped to Illinois. And there are several different versions of Bo and Sunny across the years that were used as decorations. A lot of the holiday themes really lean into the pets. So if you want to see Bo recreated in licorice, the White House made it. Licorice did not come to the Obama Library because we don't like anything that is made of food because it would attract bugs. So licorice Bo didn't come, yarn Bo came, trash bag Bo came, pom-pom bow, button bow, anything that it was not consumable is very likely part of our collections. And then the Joe and Barack friendship bracelets were also part of a social media campaign. Those are part of our collections. They have also been on exhibit to other institutions. So really a variety, again, of items that document the Obama administration. And we, as I said, we have a separate artifact team that is specialized in artifact preservation and handling. They typically have museum studies degrees and have gone into that specialized field. So switching over to what's in the records, I gave you the numbers, gave you the brief history of the laws and how presidential libraries came to get their collections. So what does that all mean? The Presidential Records Act, which was passed and implemented with President Reagan going forward, said that the president himself and all of his staff need to maintain any materials created or received in the carrying out of their constitutional, statutory, official, or ceremonial duties. So those are big words with kind of broad definitions. So it basically translates to you keep everything. If you have gone through archival training and you've taken an appraisal class where you evaluate what you might want to accession, what fits your collecting policy, at a presidential library on the archival side, we don't have appraisal. We get everything that the White House gives us, and largely we keep it. So that means we have some very beautiful, very ceremonial items from the calligraphy office. This is a dinner menu. The flowers are hand-drawn and hand-painted from fancy events. And we also have all of the papers that went across the president's desk all the way down to the summer interns. If it was used in the course of doing your job, then it should be turned over to the National Archives, either when you complete your time of service. If you were a summer intern and you only worked May until August, then in August you packed up your stuff and turned it into records management. If you worked the entire administration, then that last few days in January when you're packing up, it's crazy, but you're turning all of your stuff over to the records management team. So you can see in this folder or in this photo, those are folders being held by Vice President Biden. This photo is a little nuanced because vice presidential materials also have to be kept, but they're not at the presidential library. Those are with our friends in DC, but they also come to the National Archives. You can see a variety of folders. He's got a notebook there. So we have those types of things in our collections. This is a speech draft that President Obama significantly marked up. He was very involved in his speech writing process. And we have many drafts of speeches that look like this. And then this is actually a close-up shot of Dennis McDonough, who was chief of staff for President Obama, holding a binder. We have many, many binders that the staff turned over. And as you can see, on the front of his binder, he has this little Valentine that says, "Love, Dad," that one of his kids made for him. So he has it on there while he's working as a reminder. Of course, we all want personal reminders. And there is a carve out in the Presidential Records Act that says if it is something truly personal, not related to your job duties, you do not have to turn it over. So Dennis McDonough would have been free to take this Valentine with him. I honestly don't know if it ended up in the records or not. But that is a personal record that does not need to be turned over to the National Archives. If it accidentally was, and believe me, there are many, many cases where truly personal things get mixed in with the presidential records, either paper or on email. We've all had to, that we should do it as rarely as possible, send a personal email from our work account. There is a provision in the Presidential Records Act, and that is why archivists work on the records to protect that. We would not release that to the public. It has nothing to do with your job. This accidentally mixed in. We would withhold that from public release. All right. And then about the new model. So I mentioned, and Justin asked, and Kyle asked about the new model of library. So, oh, guys, slides. In 2017, so President Obama left office in January. In May of 2017, he made the decision not to build a building and donate it back to the government for his presidential library. He was free to make that decision. There is no law requiring you have to build a library building. There are laws that say if you build it, it needs to have these requirements. It needs to be, rated to store archival and museum materials and all of these different things, but there is no requirement that they have to do that. So when he made the decision not to, that is when NARA pivoted and began developing the model of a digital library, where NARA will continue to maintain all of the records, we will preserve them, and we will, as per our mission as an agency, make them available to the public. So we are doing that digitally and online. So our textual paper records are being scanned and digitized. Our artifact collections are being photographed and digitized. And of course, we have a significant amount of born digital material that we are able to process and then make available online. And after our temporary facility closes, which it will close at the end of next month, the end of September, which is very, very close, NARA will be storing all of these materials, everything you saw in those photos, at its Archives 2 facility, as we call it, which is in the DC area in College Park, Maryland. George, what will happen to the original analog artifacts? Everything will still be maintained. We are literally just picking it up and moving it to a different facility. Some of you may have heard in the news about the Obama Presidential Center. So even though President Obama chose not to build a building that he would share with the National Archives, he is building a presidential center to showcase his legacy and also to be a community center in the Chicago area. So that is being constructed by his foundation, and that is going to be a privately operated, privately run institution. It's currently under construction, and they're targeting next spring for a public opening. But again, it's going to be privately run, which is different than how past presidential libraries have operated. We will still work together. The National Archives is looking into new ways we can partner with the Presidential Center under this new model as a digital library. How can we evolve? How can we maintain the connections? And that will include them borrowing some of our artifacts, some of our archival materials to display in their building, just as we would loan to any other professionally rated institution. So they will be able to display materials, and we're looking into other ways of partnerships, but it's not going to be that full traditional joint physical space that the other presidential libraries have been. So how will people access the new material? And this is where I'll get into a little bit of FOIA. We are working to get as much digitized as possible. We have 2 links here. Both are accessible through our library website, which is obamalibrary.gov. We have a digital research room, and we have a digital artifacts collection. Both of them are searchable, and both of them are continually being updated, and things are being added to them as we process and make things digestible for the public. So one of the big ways that the public gets access on the record side is through Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA. So presidential records become subject to FOIA requests 5 years after the president leaves office. That is a provision of the Presidential Records Act law. That was put into place with that specific time frame because Congress, in their wisdom, when they passed this law, were like, hey, 5 years, that's so much time. They'll have it all organized. They'll have it all ready to go. People will be able to look through it no problem after 5 years. And then we got 30 million pieces of paper and 200 million emails, and 5 years is barely enough time to get a good inventory of all of that stuff. So at 5 years, the public can start submitting requests. And then your requests come into the library. We log the request. We do what's called our initial search, where we run through all of our material and say, okay, we think we have this many pages, this many emails related to your topic. And Based on that number, the request goes into a queue. And then in each queue, things are processed essentially first come, first serve. So there is a queue, we call it in and out for very small things, like, 100 pages or less. And then there is a medium-sized queue, and then there's the very large queue for when people write and say, I literally want everything on healthcare, anything that ever says healthcare, I want all the records on healthcare. And we try to explain to them that they will probably be dead before we process all of that, and they still say, hey, I want everything on healthcare. So we don't want the person who is like, well, I only requested 10 pages getting stuck behind the person who wants everything on healthcare. So we have this separate queue system to try to make it equitable so that we're processing from each of these lists at the same time. And that very, very large, complex list, we process in chunks. So Jill requested some crazy amount of material. We process 50,000 pages for Jill. Then she goes to the back of the line and works her way up again, and she'll get another 50,000 pages. So that system was implemented to make it as equitable as we possibly can. How many employees are dedicated to FOIA requests? We have 11 archivists right now that work on processing FOIAs. So 10 of them focus on our paper and email, and then one focuses specifically on AV. But depending on size of request, urgency, all of those different factors, we can shift resources as needed. And all of this material is reviewed, as we say, line by line. Human eyeballs read all of this stuff before it is released to the public. I know that there is exploration of how AI can assist in this review process, and it certainly can in certain cases. It's very easy for AI to look at a document and say, okay, there's a social security number, there's somebody's phone number, those are things we need to protect, automatically slam dunk. There's a lot of nuance in the Presidential Records Act law that does not lend itself to AI, that still requires human brains and human eyeballs. So 11 people, 30 million pages, 200 million email, it's going to take us a while, but we are making things available. It is through our website. It is through the National Archives online catalog, and records are available for viewing. So unfortunately, just because we have digitized and scanned it, that doesn't automatically mean we can throw it up online and have it available for research, because we still have that key piece of review and the human eyeballs. All right, so I mentioned we have the textual collections. Those are being made available through our digital research room. We also have our digital artifacts collection, and I just wanted to illustrate how you can use those tools to find connections across all of our variety of materials. And I've got like 2 examples that we can go through pretty quickly. So Aretha Franklin, I'm from the Detroit area, hometown girl, Queen of Soul. She has some pretty big Obama connections. She sang at the 2009 inauguration, and she wore this hat, which back in the day broke the internet, broke the world with this hat. Was, again, hometown Detroit milliner that made it. And I went to his shop. It was very cool for all of us who have Detroit connections. The hat became an icon. This is a Christmas ornament of the hat that someone sent in as a gift, and it is now part of our artifact collections. This photograph is part of our AV collection. And then if you're like, well, do you have anything else related to Aretha? You can see that this brooch, she actually gifted this brooch to President Obama on the occasion of the inauguration. She did not gift the hat ornament. That came from elsewhere. And then what else? What other connections were there with Aretha? So later on in the administration, Aretha actually performed at the White House. You can see President Obama got up there on stage with her to do a little duet at a Women of Soul event. The Obama White House partnered with PBS for several of these in performance at the White House occasions. And this is the program from that event, which came from our textual materials that we digitized. And Aretha, among others, performed. And then if you go to the former Obama White House YouTube account, which is now maintained by the National Archives, there is a video behind the scenes of Women of Soul. So you can see a little video of the performance. And that video is part of our audiovisual collections. So having a digital library gives researchers a really unique opportunity to pull all these things together and bridge the varieties of formats and make their own connections and present them in a unique way that you can also do at traditional presidential libraries, but it's a lot easier when it's in a digital format and accessible online from wherever you are. We don't have the travel requirement, which I still encourage travel. Each of these libraries are so unique architecturally and design, and the president selected their locations, so they are still something to see. But this is an opportunity that we have as a digital presence to really expand the use and connections with our materials. So that's my girl Aretha. And then one other topic is the state visit by Japanese Prime Minister in 2015. I really enjoyed this topic because of some of these pictures of President Obama with Prime Minister Abe in the DC area outside of the White House. They went to the Lincoln Memorial, they saw the reflecting pool. It's, to me, it's just so interesting. That didn't, to my knowledge, happen that often, that they would go kind of off campus and explore the city so much. But just really, really unique experiences that are captured in our materials. So they visited the Lincoln Memorial. And then, as part of the state visit, there was a state dinner. And we have in our textual records the invitation to that dinner. It was black tie, so hope you have your dress code ready. And also, as you see, dig through the collections a little bit, this state dinner was actually the debut of the Obama State China. So each president typically has their own set of China dinnerware produced. And the Obama China was debuted at this dinner. It has that turquoisey blue rim, which is very specific. It's Kailua blue, which connects to the president's Hawaiian birthplace. And if you look on, again, that YouTube site, there's a little video with the curator about the debut of the China, another collection, and we have a sample place setting of the China in our holdings. And then here's a photo from the actual state dinner. Everybody did wear their black tie. They're looking real sharp. And Mrs. Obama is there in this very vibrant, gorgeous purple gown. And that gown is also part of our collections. We have a significant amount of Mrs. Obama's dresses. And this was designed by a Japanese designer. It's such a beautiful color, purple. And it is also in our collections. So again, just another example of how you can just dig deep and really pull these threads together to present just a drop into what it was like in the Obama administration in 2015. So that wraps up my portion of the presentation. I think I went a tad bit longer than Justin had designed, but we still have time for questions. And I've got up here, again, our library website, obamalibrary.gov. Our general reference email is obama.library@NARA, NARA, nara.gov. Um, and that goes to our reference inbox that my staff manages. If you need to talk to me directly, it's just first name dot last name at nara.gov, and that will go directly to me. But I'm happy to take any questions, thoughts that you guys have.
I'm gonna just jump in and say that I'm declaring you the Aretha Franklin of archiving librarians. That was fantastic. Okay, so I'll
Thank you.
last question.
Yeah, and I'll check the chat and make sure I didn't miss anybody. We talked about FOIA, but Jenna, please let me know if you need a deeper dive into FOIA. Um,
I actually had
but
one.
that's it.
Was you
Sure.
mentioned there's a proprietary video protocol or whatever you call it that you use. What was the rationale for that, do you think? Meaning you can't go home and play it on
It's,
your own Blu-ray player, I suppose.
well, a lot of it, I mean, I guess it's proprietary. It's like Sony XD Cam. So in order to read the media, you have to have that specific reader, but the files on the disc aren't necessarily proprietary. They can still be played through your AV media player. I'm not sure exactly what all of the video formats are, but it's just getting them off that original media. And I think at the time, so again, 2009 to 2017, that was probably the best quality available at the time. They were using the best format. Um, Similar to the older presidential libraries, like they got stuff on Betacam, and now the Betacam players are nearly all gone, and they're just cannibalizing the others to keep them going. So that is one thing that NARA is focused on, is really file format migration. We're a lot better about it on physical media than we are on electronic media. Um, Probably because the electronic volume is just so much bigger.
Okay, thank you.
Uh, I got a couple questions in the chat. The migration of the physical collections present any specific or unique challenges? Well, moving 50,000 artifacts and 30 million pages of paper halfway across the country is never easy. Um, there's a lot of tracking, making sure that, sorry, I'm like in here in the dark, um, tracking every box, how we pack it, and that it goes exactly on the shelf at its new location so that we know where it lives, so that we can find the materials in it again. My artifact friends, they have a lot more of the 3D Tetris. How do I fit all of these crates onto a truck and all of that? Um, how do I get a 7-foot sculpture of a dog in the door? So I'm lucky that my records are in much more standard and unified um, containers, but it has definitely been, kind of Tetris, Legos, Jenga on our artifact side. A couple of questions about interns. We are not currently taking interns because we're doing this whole move and everything's crazy, but I know that we want to start up our internship program again, if not this fall, perhaps in the winter, definitely the spring. So we will certainly be looking for interns again. If you are in the DC, Maryland area, please reach out. We can put your name on a list and we can let you know when those are available, because we really we've had some great interns in Illinois who did a lot of work for us, and we want to keep that going. We really rely on our interns. And two other questions. Politics brings opinions and emotions. How have you separated your political opinions and personal beliefs in your work? Um, that is a really interesting question. Um, I will say that the National Archives, we are a nonpartisan institution. We are, yes, a federal government agency, but we are nonpartisan. It's my job to preserve the records and make them available. It is not my job to interpret or provide my opinions. So I've worked at multiple presidential libraries for presidents of both political parties. And my job is really independent of that because I'm making it available. I'm preserving it for historians, students, researchers, history to evaluate them both now and then long term in the future when more time has passed and we have longer effects of these presidencies and opinions evolve and the impacts are felt in a different way. So I can't tell you that it's always easy to work with materials from a presidential administration of either party. At the George W. Bush Library, one of my very first days on the job, we opened up the box and here were the notes from his speeches on 9/11. And that's a moment where, you get chills, you sit and you have to sit with it and you have to give yourself the space to personally process and absorb. Um, and similarly at the Obama Library, I came across the speech he gave at the memorial service after the Sandy Hook shooting. Those are really, really tough. Um, and that's when you rely on your colleagues to support and talk it through. Because with a lot of these records and the legal protections, I can't always, well, I'm a little different because my husband also works at the Obama Library. That's how we met. So I can come home and talk to my spouse about what I saw on the records today, but not everybody has that luxury. So we rely on our archival colleagues, we rely on our other presidential libraries because each era has its touch points where when you're working with materials related to a sensitive, a difficult event, um, you need that space. So let me check. Do you have a group who specifically studies social media? We have had researchers who worked on social media. I don't know. NARA is definitely had to evolve how it does records capture and how we preserve social media. Um, the Obama administration was the first to use social media, and they were also very conscious of the impact of that and the need to preserve it. So they worked very closely with the National Archives to transfer over a data set of all of the social media accounts. NARA also maintains those accounts on their native platforms as much as we possibly can. So if you go to, I don't even know if it still works. I assume it does. Twitter.com slash, it was POTUS, but now it's like POTUS 44. That's Obama's Twitter from his administration. So his account became POTUS 44, and the regular POTUS handle passed on to the next administration. So POTUS 44, POTUS 45, POTUS 46, all of that stuff. A lot of record keeping, even though there is the Presidential Records Act and there are laws in place that records have to be turned over, the law doesn't dictate how those records are kept, how they're organized, how they're maintained. That is a White House function, and they can determine how they want to do it. NARA will advise. If we are asked, we will consult, but we don't come in, much as I would like that we would be able to impose our way of record keeping. The White House is able to decide that. So especially with social media, each administration has used different tools to do that. And some of that is because the technology is evolving so fast that there's newer tools become available that are better. Remote internship opportunities, we haven't done that yet, but I wouldn't say that we never will. So if you're interested, again, shoot us an email and just say if you would be in person or remote, and we can keep you on a list and let you know what opportunities come up. Yeah, I think I got all the questions out of the chat. Thanks, Kenvi.
I'm going
That's
to
our
end the
director.
recording. Thank you so much, Jill. This was great, and we really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And please, anytime, any questions about Obama or beyond, I'm happy to answer or connect you with a resource who will be able to.
Okay,
So.
recording in